With great pleasure, let me now welcome the Union Finance Minister of India on ET Now, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman. Madam Minister, I know it's been a busy and a hectic week for you. You've still accommodated this interview request, so thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Madam Minister, this year's budget has struck all the right chords. For an economy which was reviving because of pandemic, this budget will ensure that the acceleration to growth continues. We were looking at your budget speech, and this is the fascinating part. The four most used words in your this year's budget speech were development, invest, infra, and growth. So is it fair to say that is the crux of this year's budget?
Yes, actually, because we were clear from the very start for the preparation of the budget that last year's policies will continue. It is in the interest of the economy to give stability in policy, and it is in the interest of the economy to sustain the growth which people have somehow pulled through and, amidst all odds. I repeat the admiration I have for the people of India who have gone through terrible odds. Every family has been affected. Every friend has suffered. So it's not a time where anyone has escaped untouched by this pandemic. And at this time, therefore, it was important for the government to continue the role of being supportive. Even if private investment is taking a time, a while to come into this whole scene, government will have to spend and pull the economy forward. And gradually as we do this, we expect the private investment also to come out in its full force. And unless we give this sustained support, it would be a great letdown and a costly letdown, which we did not want and we don't intend to also. After all, if people can do so much for the economy, why would we want to? Therefore, yes, impetus on public investment, capital expenditure, impetus on infra, because that has a great multiplier. I was comparing the multiplier of per rupee spent, it's more than 2.95, whereas the revenue would just be less than 1. And so infra, and then looking at growth being the only way through which we can level or bridge the difference which exists between one set of people who are successfully conducting their businesses and others who are struggling. So to bring in that factor, which Prime Minister Modi has been always saying, even as a Chief Minister, that unless development is, actually full and kicking, you're not going to be able to bridge the differences in the well-being of the people. So yes, that's the focus.
Madam Minister, has Team Nirmala redefined the budget-making exercise in India? I'm not talking about your migration from briefcase to the digital tab. Budget is now transparent, continuity. It is powerful. There is nothing called fine print now. And everything what you indicate or what you've indicated in the last budget, you've continued with that. Have you consciously changed the budget-making exercise of India?
All of us have made it possible. And I don't want to say I have done it, but I've certainly been insisting on it. And the first thing, I think, the lesson which I've learned from the Prime Minister is that, when you produce a speaking document and when you execute it to the last mile, people trust you. That is where I think that effort has shown in the last 5-6 years, the last mile delivery of services, together with everything to do with this government's approach of governance being transparent, accountable. So budget, an important statement, should reflect that principle. And therefore, yes, the ministry has made every attempt since the last year to ensure that it becomes a document which says what it is got to say and never hides anything.
Can I safely bring this point out that the government balance sheet or the current government balance sheet is the strongest balance sheet in a long time? Every big write-off has been taken care of, whether it is bank recapitalization, legacy subsidies. Assumptions are very conservative, we'll talk about them. And also the revenue forecasting is something which is achievable. So can I say that this is one of the finest and the strongest balance sheet of the government ever?
And a trustworthy document. After all, in the arena of finance, in the arena of economy, where so many different factors come into play and are dynamic always, if you're not able to produce a document which is above board, it can be criticized for being underestimative and conservative, but it cannot be a document which has a complete disconnect with the world. Yes, it's a robust world, it's a dynamic world, it has unforeseen number of parameters, sometimes imponderables, but still it has to be relevant and be relatable for people who are active in it. For people who are actively engaged, like let's say you, for instance, if it doesn't have any resonance and if you think, what am I reading, where's this from, then it makes no sense. And for an economy of Indian complexity, we can't be producing fancy fictions.
Yes, the transparency I think is the key word. I mean, whichever way we look at the whole balance sheet analysis. Now, the post-pandemic recovery has not been very even. Economists are using the famous letter K. What is the government doing to ensure that? One side we can look at the growth part. There is a touch of push towards risk and private sector capex, which is what we eventually want to achieve. What about the end of the economy which has suffered?
I've always made it a point not to get into arguments about the alphabets that people, attribute. There are some who said it's W growth. There are some who are saying it's K. And there are some who are disputing K. I think just today I've been reading Vivek Debroy also saying, what are we talking about K? So in his own style, he's also questioned that. So no alphabet game for me. I'm more keen on making sure that those who are still, out there struggling to get back to where they were or be better than what they were earlier, it's my business to see how best I can reach them. Now, many of the things which happen in such periods from the government side is not for want of intent. I'll give you a classic case. You will remember that one of the things that we did post the second wave last April, we announced a scheme whereby we could help people working in tourist centers, tourist guides, tour operators and so on. To make that scheme workable, it was such an exercise because after all, in government when you're dealing with public money, you need some basic data on the basis of which you'll tailor-make the scheme. Or at least tailor-make it loosely so that each state can adopt for it. It was just not possible to obtain credible basic data of how many, let us say, tourist guides would be there. At the state level, some people are recognized. At the central level, some people are recognized. But just tourist guides, what are the other things? It was a big exercise for a government because unless I have that, I will not be in a position to justifiably to start from somewhere. Similar is to even, okay, that got sorted out. But even today, similarly, I've had an issue. I've had conversations with a lot of people in the art, fine arts, in the sense, entertainment business, art, classical dancers, classical musicians. They're people who are around them, who, like you have, support artists, makeup men, and also like you have the camera and so on. Now, particularly those accompanying artists of musicians, they've had a real trying time. And quite a few representations came to me. But where do I start? They are not yet in such a way given a recognition, some identity, some proof of occupation and all that. That's why I lay a big trust on the e-Shram portal which has come. I would want everybody who belong to the informal, not so well organized sector, but that's fine, that sector need not be organized, but at least get onto the e-Shram portal. As it is, I'm happy. There are some 400 professions which have got recorded there, of which nobody had any record. We need such things to take place in the country. Otherwise, for government to make policy without data in hand, of such data, is very, very difficult.
We'll slowly take your message forward. While you've been asked this question before, that government expenditure is slow. That's largely because of pandemic, impact of second wave. For those who are questioning government's ability to spend because of the higher capex count, are they underestimating Prime Minister's vision on Gati Shakti? Because that large engine, if they start working in, all the expenditure would be diverted in a very productive manner.
That's right. It's also a question of drawing the best synergy that you can. Because in India, roads have always been made. There are ports existing much before, for the last 40, 50 years. There are also manufacturing zones in different parts of the country. There are no interlinkages between them. Okay, you started a manufacturing center here, but for it to reach the port or some kind of a airport or seaport from where they can sell their products, or even closer to getting them closer to the raw material heads, or in the neighborhood having a residential place where their children can study, or even to go to the neighborhood in the nearby area, a city, commuting between the place where they are in the manufacturing zone to the city. So these kind of gaps in connectivity of different kinds. And everything is there but no internet of today. Earlier it used to be phones. So that's exactly what the PM Gati Shakti is now bringing in, a framework into which all of this can be fitted and made sure that your investment in making a, let's say, manufacturing zone is not going to be headless, tailless, connectionless. That's the benefit PM Gati Shakti will bring in, into which the national infrastructure pipeline will get into. The monetization of assets also will come into play. So if there was a public asset, why wouldn't we want to use it to build a metro in it? But building a metro there, will it help? These kind of a holistic approach to the process of making India which can meet the challenges of India at 100. And that's why planning for the Amrit Kaal. Why did I have to lay a 25-year plan? People do keep asking me this. This is why. Because what you're looking at, infrastructure is not built for today, for just for tomorrow, and day after it disappears. What you build today will have to last 100 years. Wouldn't you want to plan for it? Will you want to give it due time of gestation?
You started your budget speech with that.
That's right.
What is Amrit Kaal? Because you've always said that budget, one, it is an annual budgeting exercise, but it is also a statement of intent, a vision statement. Amrit Kaal. What is your definition of Amrit Kaal?
Amrit Kaal is the time that is between now and India reaching 100 years. This is the time when you're in the 75th year of your independence. You surely have made a lot of progress over the decades. I'm not just saying between 14 and now, over the decades, but the rapidity with which things are changing now, also thanks to the pandemic, is the time when we have to rethink on many grounds, reset on many grounds. Industry, media is going through a churn. Yes. So aren't you all planning for it? Aren't you all planning in such a way that next decade at least you'll be in a particular way? Look at the rapidity with which print was taken over by electronic. Electronic is very quickly being taken over by direct to home. And now you also have digital news media. And everything is so free flow. And there is just no border or seam. It's borderless. And in that era, you still have some print because there is a market for it, however small. You still have an electronic. But are you stopping from planning for the next era? Because that's digital and with technology. And technology being in every aspect of life is also ever changing. So what you invest in today becomes outdated within 3-4 years. I remember the days when we were looking at pager where there will be a ping That's gone. Mobile is gone. Today you have very many other things which are coming.
So given that India now is a leader in terms of UPI payment, online transactions, something we don't talk about it, but since we have the opportunity of getting a rare interview with you, I'll extend the question to, do you think India will now have a lot of global negotiating power in data protection in terms of patents? Because we've not enjoyed that kind of an, advantage, if I may use the word.
Yes. In the digital world, the India stack, whether it's payment, I announced Desh, a particular stack of...
Global and India stack have to talk now.
That's right. For which global policies will also have to be framed. I think India will be at the high table, determining how digitization of economies can happen. We've already shown it in very many ways, not just in digital payment, also on e-Shram, also looking at education, medical help, telemedicine. All this is possible. Now you seem to have very many operations happening, surgeries happening with so many different consultants from all over the world. These are not possible without our progress which is made in digitization. And optical fiber is also taking all these to all the remotest part of the country. And when you're looking at the global, it's very heartening to know that very many developed countries too are nowhere near what we've achieved. Nowhere near in terms of the versatility with which we've extended digitization to various walks of our life. And all of them are serving not just 1,000, 2,000, 1 billion citizens are benefiting from it. These are things which we have to take abroad. And people are asking us to tell them if we can share these. What was CoWIN after all?
Yes.
Many countries really thought if you could give a digital, our citizens going in international airports are showing through a mobile the certification that 2 doses are over, whereas many of them are pulling out papers even today. So yes, I think we have a very big role to play, the futuristic one at that, and our youth are doing brilliantly well in rapidly changing the language with which, systems with which, and also the ways in which we can handle digital. Our startups are contributing a lot towards this era. It's having a play in agriculture, it's have a play in space technology as well. So we will be definitely pioneers in deciding, framing policies and helping the world in seeing how best this can apply to all of us.
The fact that there's a committee which you've already announced with your budget for startup, what is the idea behind that committee? Because the Prime Minister 2 years ago did mention that the government would be open to considering overseas listing for startups. Is the committee made with that purpose?
The committee which I've announced now is more for the private equities and venture capitals. For them, there were so many different issues which they wanted us to address. They had a video conference with the Prime Minister. They also met me, and we thought therefore that area, because also with all the existing limitations, they have come out so much that today the startups in India were in the process of becoming unicorns. We're able to mobilize resources purely from our own venture capital, from our own private equity. So we thought we should sit and see what best they would want us to do so that they can be even more robust.
Madam Minister, today the bond market or the 10-year paper closed at 7%. And the view is that markets are nervous about the government borrowing program. Inflation is coming back. Is that fear justified? How would you address that fear?
Markets have their own readings, and I wouldn't question them. They were, after all, they sense it, and they have been successful in most of their assumptions and the way in which they sense things. But even with that said, I would say I don't expect them to be so much worried about it. They shouldn't be, because we are doing it in a very transparent process. And also, there are so many other revenues, non-tax and better improved collection, all of which will add to our tax buoyancy and a non-tax collection as well. So, whilst we announce the borrowing, and whilst we also are conscious of the ways in which we are readying ourselves, it shouldn't fluster them. I am very confident that to a large extent we will be able to manage. And the announcement is not an irresponsible, hasty, knee-jerk announcement. And I don't see, in a way also, let me add this, I wonder if there is a direct correlation between my announcing the number of how much I'm going to borrow and what's developing there. It's also partly because of the US Fed's possible actions. Otherwise, how do I read the bond market responding similarly, like the way they responded post my budget, responding like that 2 or 3 days earlier also?
Yes, yes.
Prior to budget 2, they were well before, 48 hours or even over that.
The yield started going higher.
Going up. That's nothing to do with the budget.
Yes, yes.
I didn't announce any numbers. So I have a feeling they are alert to all the global developments. They are sensing a lot of global, changes, policy interventions, all of which probably is also working in their mind, and it's just not my number.
The fact that no decision has been taken on India's bond inclusion in the global index, from the ministry standpoint, is that still up for consideration, or that since no decision has been taken, it's a shut case now?
No decision has been taken is not a shut case.
Okay.
We would say it's a shut case if it is.
I'd like to draw your attention to the disinvestment number. Air India, very tough disinvestment. Sincere compliments it has gone through. The divestment process in India has changed now. It's no longer selling via ETF. It is no longer selling dribs and drabs or pseudo disinvestment. Has the divestment in the process in India changed? And can I use, instead of divestment, it should be privatization now?
Why hadn't I said this in the budget last year?
Which is that it's now getting endorsed.
Yes. I used the word privatization in the last budget, and I was grateful to the media which received it very well, because those of you who do business channels do understand what it actually means. And no, the process is on. We are going ahead with it. There is no change. But it is a truth that the systems in the government do consume a lot of time in complying with the existing rules. Air India was a classic case, a complex case, a layered case, where we had to do all the necessary tying up and be accountable. I think others would be less consuming of time. So it should go as per plan, which was announced last year in the budget.
The indications what we've gone is LIC IPO will hit the market very soon. Will LIC IPO hit the market with a 5-10% stake, and will the government stake stay there? Because in some of the other government listings like Coal India, NTPCs, in subsequent years, the stake has come down. What are your thoughts there?
Well, at this stage where, the red heading prospectus is likely to be announced, it wouldn't be good for me to comment or speculate on it. Just wait for the document to be out. You'll know about LIC. But as I said, our approach is what we have announced in the budget of last year. We continue with it. Through this budget, I've wanted to provide the continuity, the stability, and a predictable course for everybody, saying that's what has been announced, it will continue.
The Revenue Secretary today mentioned the names: BPCL, Shipping Corporation, Container Corporation, Concur. So I'm assuming that
all that which was mentioned earlier as cleared by the cabinet already.
Okay. But rather than looking at a number and comparing that with whether the number is big or small, I think it's important for our viewers to understand that what is the roadmap on disinvestment and privatization. You've extended this point in the past that government only wants to be in the critical businesses.
Yes,
you
that
would be
core
vacating
sector
the
definition
spectrum.
has been given. Again, in the last year's budget, we defined what was those absolute critical strategic sectors, and in that, whilst opening it up for private sector, we said in it we will keep at least a bare minimum of public sector units in that category. So if I were to look at banking, obviously banks.
Yes.
I will have certain number of banks government owned. Similarly, even in the insurance sector. General insurance, life insurance, insurance underwriters. There are categories. Under each one of them, we will have to keep some core. It's not as if therefore privatize, like the way some of the opposition speaks. Yes. It's not that. Core sector, the strategic list which was announced last year's budget, in those sectors, there will be public sector undertaking, continuing to be with the government under each category.
So, 65,000 crore, the number, I'm going back to that number, is just a moving number then. Because the whole attempt to, the whole mantra of government of minimum government and maximum governance, it ties beautifully with the privatization process. So, next 3 years, lot many things may happen.
Yes. How much can you do within a year is also the question. That is why I'm saying, don't forget from the last year's budget, we are doing this continuously. So each year, something or the other will have to happen.
Are you being conservative, Madam Minister? Are you keeping cushions purposely on the assumption side for tax collection, also
no,
on the disinvestment side?
I'm being realistic, I would say.
But that could also be a view of economy, Madam Minister, because if you are assuming a conservative growth in taxes, that ties in with your view on the economy.
It ties with the view that I have to be fair about the numbers I give.
Okay.
It ties with the view that I want to be honest about the numbers. So.
Okay, equity market. Every time when there is a budget, the same question, STT, long-term dividend tax. Now that tax collections are coming back. And I remember in Mumbai in 2020 after the budget, when you were there, you did indicate that give me some time, I will come back with more. Let me get some data. Do you have enough data where you can take a view that all these three taxes should coexist?
On the long-term capital gains, when was it introduced? And what was defined as long-term then? Wasn't it at least 3 years and a half more?
Yes.
From the time of introduction of the latest LTCG, we've just completed 3 years. And in the 3 years, say 2 years have gone in the pandemic. So what is the measure with which I can test the performance or non-performance or failure of the policy on LTCG that was brought in by this government? So before I even assess that, before I even see what impact it has had on capital gains at all, there's a thirst saying, no, do something on it. Why? What? Please.
I'm going to quote you from our last interaction exactly a year ago. And I asked you, Madam Minister, taxes, will they go down? That's obviously the question. And your reply was, I have not applied my mind about bringing rates down or increasing. I want a stable tax regime. I am completely against a mercurial one that changes every year. And tax regime means stable. But what about the DTC roadmap? And I specifically remember you'd mentioned that 75th year of independence and you could reconsider the surcharge on super rich.
First of all, on the making a direct tax code which is more simple and easy to comply, I have already laid the roadmap in the last or the one before budget, last budget, I think, where we gave a twin track. Get out of exemptions if you want. Here's another track in which if you come in, it is simple, you pay this much, which is easier, lesser tax, and nothing to worry after that. That's a beginning that I've made.
Yes.
And I'm seeing progress in it. People are moving. So these are steps forward in that direction.
Now, Prime Minister had promised incentives to honest taxpayers. There are honest taxpayers in India.
No, I've thanked them last year and this year. I've been thanking them.
But just a thank you, nothing more in terms of a
no, I mean, you didn't even say thank you also would have been a crime. I've crossed that one stage. And I don't see nothing more is truth. But there are things which have been done. And first of all, bringing faceless, reducing the time to which your records will have to be kept, subjecting yourselves to review, all that has changed. I remember in 2019, the first loud call I heard was tax terrorism. Would you say that today? But of course, yes, if there are reasons for searches to happen because you find 23 kgs of gold in a household, you find 250 crore of cash kept in household, searches shouldn't happen. That will happen. But harassment, no.
This is the most underappreciated part by a lot of people, that how ease of doing business and tax compliance has only leading to better results. What are the numbers which prove that?
Tax compliance, first of all, two things here. The GST collection improving at a time when we are just coming out of the pandemic, where it's the businesses who pay it, consumer end being collected, but the retailer or somebody who pays it. If it is increased, it's not just because businesses are expanding. Yes, businesses are expanding. But the plugging of the loopholes, plugging of the leaks, stopping false claims, cutting down on fake claims are all ways in which the same number of people, size of business being similar, is yielding better results. So that is one of the things which even in direct taxation I'm seeing working. So bringing in technology in tax practice, meaning tax regime, in the tax administration has made a lot of difference. And that difference is something which I'd like to continue, because whilst I agree that it might impersonalize the matter, there could be still some people who would want to go and meet the officer and say, this is what I'm doing. You're welcome to. But the administration will have to be non-discretionary, and it has to happen by default, ideally. And that's where we are taking the whole thing. So I would focus on that first.
Crypto, I know you've been asked this question, so let me rephrase my next question slightly differently. Sovereign in its right has put a transaction tax. That's the right of a sovereign. But is this also an indication by the sovereign that they are trying to curb speculation?
Well, if it eventually leads to cutting down on speculation, it could be one of the collaterals. But we are going there to make sure that if it is happening, we need to know if there's any profit being made, and rightly, profit also will have to pay a share to the government exchequer. So we've gone in there. But if it results in lack of or reduction in speculation, well.
So we should not read too much into the intent of taxation.
At this stage, I'm open-minded about what is happening there. That is why the consultation, and that is why I'm steadfastly saying that I'm not giving anything which is in my mind yet, because I have to form my thoughts once the inputs come.
But the Reserve Bank of India's view, how much importance would you give to that? Because that's a view coming from a regulator.
Of course, both the SEBI and RBI, I've consulted. Not once, several times. We've been having this continuous interaction with them. It's not without the consultation with the regulators of monetary affairs and regulators of the stocks.
So as of today, it should only be read as a tax on a transaction, and sovereign in its right has put a tax on transaction. Nothing more, nothing else. Okay. A very basic question, Madam Minister. A question which changes my life at least. I'm a borrower, I have a home loan, I have a car loan. Interest rates will move higher. If interest rates move higher, one of the reasons why demand made a comeback is because rates have been artificially low, both locally and globally. Is that the biggest challenge now? Whether it's this year or next year, but interest rates which will go up because of inflation or because of Fed tightening, but they will go higher. It will impact demand.
But equally, there are saving elders, senior citizens, small savings people who for a very long time have been at the raw end. Their savings has not yielded anything to them. Senior citizens whose lifetime savings are giving them absolutely minuscule amounts. They probably will be looking forward to the day when rates can go up. So it's always a balance that we have to.
It's astonishing that you can always find answer to any difficult question. Madam Minister, now the decision to rationalize GST will be taken by the GST Council. Everybody is aware of that. But what is your personal view, given that a tax buoyancy is coming back? Should rates be rationalized? Your personal view, Madam Minister.
No, rates have to be rationalized at least to the extent where there is inversion. That's my first step. Because otherwise, tell me which business will agree with you giving refunds much more than earning out of any item. You're giving refunds much more than what is coming in the name of revenue from that head. Is that a good business? There should not be any loss to anybody. Nobody should be taxed much more than what actually is a pronounced or announced policy. But there are times when the government is ending up with collecting nothing, if anything, giving refunds, and there are some perverse incentives which have got built into the system, whereby the more they produce, the more they manufacture, the more they sell, they get more in refunds.
Yes.
The perversion in the system which is crept in is not justifiable at all. To that extent, I want corrections.
Madam Minister, I'll not extend my appointment beyond, I know you've got a packed evening ahead. A couple of last questions. In order to keep consumer interest at bay, the government announced a duty cut, a retail fuel duty cut after Diwali. Crude prices have gone higher. And given how there are imbalances, there are geopolitical challenges, if crude prices they go higher, will you be forced to bring taxes down?
I'll have to see how it goes. Because last year we've had extraordinary increases in fuel, extraordinary increases in fertilizer, all of which we absorbed in a way, partly in fuel, but almost near total in the case of fertilizers, which urea, which come from anywhere else. We don't produce that kind of urea in our country. So global prices have impacted us. And last year we did take a huge share of that global price impact on ourselves.
We've seen the ethos of 18 hours rise with India, and Indians are now changing their asset allocation. SIPs have started. Indians are investing in equities. They are betting on Indian entrepreneurs. Gone are those days where FIs were the only investors. It's a very proud moment for all of us.
That's right. Look at the number of demat accounts, net ones, unique ones.
Is the finance ministry happy with that? Or you think it's a bubble, or you would like to warn retail investors?
No, the retail interest in the stock market is a healthy sign. Our youngsters are finding that there are other ways, other than keeping it in fixed deposit, there are ways in which they can engage, however risky it might be. However risky, but if you were a discerning investor, you're able to see which are the companies doing well, which are run transparently. Board-driven processes are being, guiding the companies. They're able to see and therefore invest in such companies, and I welcome that.
Final question, Madam Minister. Your speech was relatively short, but on words, you've really made a powerful impact. Was that the intent this time?
Yes, certainly. Last year too and this year too, I have myself written the speech. I've spent a lot of time in making sure that the words matter and that it should not be a haranguing speech that people think, oh my God, why can't he end? I wanted it to be conveying what is there, and I've spent time writing last year's and this year's speech myself.
This is one question which has come on our social media. The ministry announced that you've kindly agreed for interview request, which is that, can you please check with Madam Minister, does she check stock markets, bond yields, or even value of rupee on a daily basis? Do you do that?
Don't my answers reflect it?
Well, they do. Really appreciate your time, Madam Minister.
Thank
Good
you
luck, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you to
Thank
you and your
very much.
viewers.
Thank you very much.